Sounds so promising.
You in front or something?
Well, good morning, and before we go on to our announcements, just invite you to turn around and see who you're worshiping with today. We'll spend a few moments in greeting. take your seats, and if you have a bulletin with you, you can pull your bulletin out. Welcome to those who are joining us online as well. We email our bulletins out in advance of the service, so if you are not receiving them but would like to, please just either send me a text or leave a phone message at the church office or email our church office, and we'd be happy to add you to that. Our Discovery Land is up and running again for our new fall season, so that's from ages 3 to grade 3. They're dismissed just before the sermon during our service, so they're here for most of our service and then dismissed at that point for their time downstairs. Just a reminder to the parents, please remember if your kids are going to Discovery Land to sign them in with the ushers when you walk through the door in the morning, and then to collect them and sign them out at the end of the service as well. It's just one of the requirements and part of our plan to protect and just ensuring that we have a safe environment for our kids. So we just want to make sure they're signed in, and we want to make sure that we've handed them off to you and we haven't just let them go someplace. So just remind you to do that. The ushers will help you with that when you come through the door. Small groups. Our Elder Board was working on our small groups this week and what we're going to be doing with them and beginning to set them up. We are hoping to have the small groups put up and contacted this coming week. We have tentatively 3 facilitators for that are working on that. And so we're gonna set that up. Our goal is to have them up and running before the end of October, and we'll run from the end of October to just around the beginning of December every second week. So just kind of a slow start, and then come back in January through to the end of our season. We'd like to give a little bit of a break over the Christmas time because we know that between work stuff and family stuff, there are a lot of evenings taken up. So we want to be respectful of that. But if you haven't signed up for a small group yet, and you would still like to, there is a sign-up sheet in the foyer. Please see that. I know I sent out an email to many of you. You could respond to that as well. But if you haven't signed up yet, you find, I meant to, but last Sunday and the Sunday before, I forgot all about it by the time that pastor was done talking, which was so long that it took. I couldn't remember that I needed to do that anymore. So just want to remind you, if you're still looking at signing up for small groups, we are looking to do that. October 27th, I believe. I forgot to have the date put in, but our church is having its 40th anniversary in Portland Club since God planted this church here. God has done so many good things through the church here, and so many things through the ministry, despite the fact that some of our history's been a rocky history. That's part of our history as well, and that's part of what we come towards God. When we come to celebrate landmarks like a 40th anniversary, we're not the star of the story. God is the star of the story, and so we are looking to gather to worship Him, to give thanks to Him. Reverend Clint Mix from our district office will be down to share with part of that morning. We're hoping to have a combined music team for that morning. We're still in the works for it. We will be having a potluck. We are getting cake. So that's all going to be part of that October, I believe it's the 27th, last Sunday in October. I just encourage you to keep that on your calendar. If there are people that you know that have moved away, I'm not sure with our database exactly how to contact people that have been part of our church that have moved on. We're going to kind of put together a little flyer this week that we can email out. If you've got a name or an email or contact, or you can talk to them directly, just love to send out those invitations to those who maybe have moved on from our church and invite people to participate in that. And so that's the 40th anniversary. Just keep that on your calendar. Daily Bread devotionals are available in the back foyer. Please feel free to grab one of those. I didn't get the video together for it, but there is a Right Now Media video that I'm hoping to show one of these Sundays. As a church, we subscribe for our entire church, for all of our church families, a Christian streaming media platform. And so that Christian, well, we got 3. I will compete with the train. Christian streaming platform that has Bible studies, that has children's programming, and all kinds of stuff. That is completely free to you. We pay for that as a church. It's part of our ministry. But to access it, I need to send you a link. I need to send you a code. So if you haven't already signed up for Right Now Media, but you would like to have access to that Christian streaming media platform, just send me an email, tap me on the shoulder, write a note out. Either a note or a text or an email works best, because sometimes if you tell me something after the service, my mind is so scrambled I don't remember it by Tuesday morning. So if you're not signed up on Right Now Media and would like to be part of that, please let me know as well. In a few moments, we will call our ushers forward for our morning offering. If you are a visitor here this morning, please feel more than comfortable letting that pass by. Worshiping God through giving, and I know many of us do that online now, but we still make that part of our service. And we do that for as much a symbolic reason as for any part of collection. So that we as God's people, when we look at how we worship God, we tangibly see that we are worshiping God also out of the material aspects that He's blessed us with. If you're a visitor here this morning, please feel more than comfortable letting it pass by. I know many of you give online. Please let it pass by. But this is an opportunity for us to worship God through giving. We also, council wanted me to remind our congregation, we as a church, separate from our general fund, we have a benevolent fund. And one of the things we do with that benevolent fund is it's something we use to help people in our church, families in our church and families in our community as needs arise. And we prayerfully discern where that should go. But that is a separate fund. And if God puts upon your heart, maybe with the Thanksgiving season, to say, you know what, I want to give something extra that's going to be used for families in need in our church and community. And one of the ways that you can do that is through supporting the church benevolent fund. Just on your offering envelope, write benevolent fund, or on your online giving, just in the notes, write the amount you want to benevolent fund. So, that's all the announcements. I want to read a passage this morning before we continue on. And as I was having my devotional time this morning, God really impressed this passage in Colossians chapter 3. And part of some of the reading that I've been doing lately on what it is to look above. You know, we get our hearts and our minds so caught on the things of this world, and so caught on the things that we get frustrated with, and so caught on the things in our workplace and our relationships. And this passage calls us to be a people of change in Christ that are looking above. So I'm going to read that, and I'll call the ushers forward as we continue in worship here. Colossians chapter 3, verses 1 to 17. If then you have been raised with Christ, seek the things that are above where Christ is seated at the right hand of God. Set your minds on things that are above, not on things of the earth. For you have died, and your life is hidden with Christ in God. When Christ, who is your life, appears, then you also will appear with him in glory. Put to death, therefore, whatever is earthly in you: sexual immorality, impurity, passion, even desire, and covetousness, which is idolatry. On account of these things, the wrath of God is coming. In these you too once walked, when you were living in them. But now you must put them all away: anger, wrath, malice, slander, and obscene talk from your mouth. Do not lie to one another, seeing that you have put off the old self with its practices, and have put on the new self, which is being renewed in the knowledge after the image of its creator. Here there is not Greek or Jew, circumcised or uncircumcised, barbarian, Scythian, slave free, for Christ is all and in all. Put on then as God's chosen ones, holy and beloved, compassionate hearts, kindness, humility, meekness, and patience, bearing with one another, and if one has a complaint against another, forgiving each other, as the Lord has forgiven you, so you also must forgive. And above all these things, put on love, which binds everything together in perfect harmony. And let the peace of Christ rule in your hearts, to which indeed you were called in one body, and be thankful. Let the word of Christ dwell in you richly, teaching and admonishing one another in all wisdom, singing psalms and hymns and spiritual songs with thankfulness in your heart to God. And whatever you do, in word or deed, do everything in the name of the Lord Jesus, giving thanks to God the Father.
merciful and mighty, God in three persons, blessed Trinity. Be still, my soul, the Lord is on thy side. Bear patiently the cross of grief for nothing shake. All now mysterious shall be bright of last. Be still, my soul, the waves and winds still know His voice who ruled them while He dealt below. In you I rest, in you I found my hope, in you I trust. You never let me go. I place my life within your hands alone. Be still, my soul. Be still, my soul. The hour is hastening on, when we shall be forever with the Lord. When disappointment, grief, and fear are gone, sorrow forgone, love's purest joys restored. Be still, my soul, when change and tears are past, all safe and blessed, meet at last. In you I found my hope. You never let me go. I place my life within your hands alone. Be still, my soul. Be still, I'm going to read Luke 8, verses 40 to 56, and got to catch my breath here. Before I read it, I would like you to all think of someone in your life who is a tween or maybe early teens, and put yourself in the boots of the adult who's taking care of this person as I read this. I think a lot of us sometimes think of the Bible as just a story, but it's real and it happened to real people. So just think about the Father in this story. Now I'll try and read it. Now when Jesus returned, the crowd welcomed him, for they were all waiting for him. And there came a man named Jairus, who was a ruler of the synagogue, and falling at Jesus' feet, he implored him to come to his house, for he had an only daughter, about 12 years of age, and she was dying. As Jesus went, the people pressed around him. And there was a woman who had had a discharge of blood for 12 years, and though she had spent all her living on physicians, she could not be healed by anyone. She came up behind him and touched the fringe of his garment, and immediately her discharge of blood ceased. And Jesus said, "Who was it that touched me?" When all denied it, Peter said, "Master, the crowds surround you and are pressing in on you." But Jesus said, "Someone touched me, for I perceive that power has gone out from me." And when the woman saw that she was not hidden, she came trembling, and falling down before him, declared in the presence of all the people why she had touched him, and how she had been immediately healed. And he said to her, "Daughter, your faith has made you well. Go in peace." While he was still speaking, someone from the ruler's house came and said, "Your daughter is dead. Do not trouble the teacher anymore." But Jesus, on hearing this, answered him, "Do not fear, only believe, and she will be well." And when he came to the house, he allowed no one to enter with him except Peter and John and James and the father and mother of the child. And all were weeping and mourning for her, but he said, "Do not weep, for she is not dead, but sleeping." And they laughed at him, knowing that she was dead. But taking her by the hand, he called, saying, "Child, arise." And her spirit returned, and she got up at once. And he directed that some things should be given her to eat, and her parents were amazed. But he charged them to tell no one what had happened.
Lord, I just thank you that we're gathered here, and Lord, scripture is read today, and we return to be your greatest fear. And I pray that you just allow you to guide us in raising our children and grandchildren, and not only our family, but to help kids outside the family. I pray that we can see a need, that we step up and do what you would want us to do, not what we think we should do. That we just allow ourselves to be led by you. And Lord, I pray for this church that we do your will and not our will. And just continue to strive to make it a beacon in the community, and to strive to work with the youth and with the kids, but also with the adults. I pray that we will be united in you and not in I. And Lord, I pray that we give thanks for the many blessings that you bestowed upon us, and that we don't rely on the middle of it, but we understand it's you who's blessed us with so much. I pray for the service and that we do your honor and glory in Jesus' name. Amen.
God sent his Son. They called him Jesus. He came to heal, and forgive. He bled and died to buy my pardon. An empty grave is there to prove my Savior lives. Because he lives, I can face tomorrow. Because he lives, all fear is gone. Because I know he holds the future, and life is worth the living just because he lives. How sweet to hold our newborn baby and feel the pride and joy he gives. But greater still, the calm assurance this child can face uncertain days, because Christ lives. Because he lives, I can face tomorrow. Because he lives, all fear is gone. Because I know he holds the future, and life is worth the living just because he lives. And then one day, across that river, I'll fight life's final war with pain. And then as death gives way to victory, I'll see the lights of glory, and I'll know he reigns. Because he lives, I can face tomorrow. Because he lives, all
grade 3, if they would follow their teachers, their leaders out the door to their time as well. While we are closing in on the end of our journey in the Gospel of Luke, and that might seem a little odd, being that we're only on Luke chapter 8, and there's 24 chapters to the Gospel of Luke. But we have spent about 20 sermons so far, 21 this morning, that have brought us up to Luke chapter 8. I want to preach a couple more sermons from Luke chapter 9, and then I want to take a break from Luke and go someplace else for a little bit. Luke, I've said over and over again, is called a gospel of stories. It's sacred history that brings theology to life. Our recent sermons and some of the places that we have been, the theology of the passages are quite straightforward. We have seen in the stories in these Gospels, we've seen the power and the authority of the Lord Jesus Christ. We've seen in his ministry, his power and authority over nature. He calms the storms despite the fears of the desperate disciples. We've seen in that last sermon in Luke chapter 8 a few weeks ago how Jesus had the power and authority to deliver a severely spiritually oppressed man from demonic strongholds. It is Jesus that has the power and authority. This morning, as we continue on with another few stories, at the end of Luke chapter 8, we see the theology of the passage is this: the power and authority of the Lord Jesus Christ over sickness and death. Sacred history, the Gospels, where we encounter the stories and teachings of Jesus, take this theology, which is often just a simple statement, the power and authority of Jesus over, but it brings that theology and lets us see and experience it within often desperate human stories. Jesus meets with a desperate humanity with his love, his hope, his power, and his healing. That is the power of the Gospels. That is the power of the Gospel of Luke. For the Gospel of Luke connects us with Jesus as we encounter real stories of both humanness and brokenness. And we find that Jesus teaches us that blessing is found when we come to the end of ourselves, the end of our rope, when we come to the end of our road, and there's nothing else. There's nothing else. And we come to see that we are left with spiritual poverty apart from Jesus. And we find a hope that Jesus is for us. Now, I know many of you weren't here 2 weeks ago with that last sermon I preached. I have a final thought from that. And hopefully it won't be disjointed for those of you who were not here. We looked in Luke chapter 8, we saw the power and authority of Jesus over the spiritual bondage that this man in Luke chapter 8 experienced. Jesus' deliverance of a man experiencing deep spiritual and demonic oppression in his life. And we saw the power and authority of Jesus to set him free. That's the theology in a lived experience. But if we flip over to Luke chapter 8, there's a few verses in there that I want to finish that with, because I think there's an important lesson that carries into this week that we need to pay attention to. Jesus is talking about the demonic. He's talking about the devil. He's talking about the one who comes to steal and kill and destroy. And he's talking about his power and authority to bind that strong man and set people free. And he finishes with a very short passage. Luke chapter 11, verses 24 to 26. And Jesus is speaking, and he says this: When the unclean spirit has gone out of a person, it passes through waterless places seeking rest, and finding none, it says, I will return to my house from where I came. And when it comes, it finds the house swept and put in order. Then it goes and it brings 7 other spirits more evil than itself, and they enter and dwell there, and the last state of that person is worse than the first. As we look at the power and authority of Jesus to deliver that man from evil, and we pray the Lord's Prayer, deliver us from evil. Jesus teaches here about what can happen after God brings healing into our life, after God breaks strongholds in our life, after God frees us from spiritual oppression. And sometimes, if we're not careful, the latter state can be worse than we were in the first place. And there's a reason for that. For the lesson in this passage is clear. It is not enough for you and I to simply experience healing or deliverance from Jesus in our lives. It is not enough for a person to simply experience that healing and deliverance from Jesus within our lives. It is not enough to be set free from spiritual or physical burdens. We need to carry on. We need to carry on with filling our hearts and lives with Jesus. We need to go forward in the freedom that we have received, in the blessing that we have received, in the healings that we have received. We need to go forward and fill our lives with Jesus and with the things of God. For dear people, if we simply look for Jesus for relief in life, if we come and say, God, come into my life, fix this, heal this, deliver me from this. If we simply come to look for Jesus for relief in our life, but then carry on separate from Jesus, carry on from that deliverance, carry on from that healing, carry on from that new freedom and joy we have. If we simply carry on separate from Jesus, we are like an empty vessel. And we will find ourselves, maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but we will find ourselves overcome by the spiritual and physical burdens that will later return to our lives. And our latter experience will be worse than the first. Dear people, it is not enough simply to go to Jesus with our burdens, to have them be set free. From that place where Jesus blesses us and we are set free, we need to carry on with Jesus. We need to passionately pursue Jesus. We need to fill our lives with Jesus. For if we are simply set free and left as an empty vessel, our lives will return to a state that was worse than it was. With that in mind, I want to carry on with Luke chapter 8. The theology truth in Luke chapter 8, the passage that was read, is the authority and power of Jesus over disease and death. But we see this theology experienced and lived out through 2 very real human stories of desperation. So I invite you to take your Bibles with me to Luke chapter 8. Luke chapter 8, your Bible or your app or whatever you've got your Bible on. If you don't have a Bible, come talk to me. We'll find you a Bible. Luke chapter 8, starting at verse 40. Let's pray as we look to unwrap this passage. Holy Spirit of God, I pray that you would fall upon us. I pray that you would take your word and do that which I cannot do. I pray, Lord, you will take your word where my words lack clarity, you may bring clarity. But more than just words of knowledge, I pray, Lord, that you would touch our hearts, that you would visit us with your Spirit through your word. Lord, may we walk away different because we encountered you. In Jesus' name. So in verse 40, it says, Jesus returned. Where he returned from? The last story 2 weeks ago. Jesus had crossed the Sea of Galilee to the other side, and that's where he had encountered this man who was in spiritual bondage, and the whole story took place of him being set free. Now Jesus has returned across the Sea of Galilee to a waiting crowd. Now Jesus returned, and the crowd welcomed him, for they were all waiting for him. And I couldn't help but notice the contrast. When he had healed the man on the other side of the Sea of Galilee, when he had ministered there, his ministry actually caused some discomfort to the rest of the people, and they told Jesus to go away. They told Jesus to go away. Now on this side of the Galilee, they're waiting for him as a crowd, saying, well, we want more. And I thought about the experience that I've had as a pastor in places that I've lived, and just looking at this verse, I couldn't help but think about the differences in geographical receptivity to Jesus. And how different, even different regions will have different geographical receptivity to Jesus. Jesus had a lot of fans waiting for him. They were there, they were the crowd, they were waiting to see what Jesus would do next. And in that crowd was this man named Jairus. Jairus, who was described as the ruler of the synagogue. We'll get to that in a moment. But Jairus comes, he has a daughter. It's his only daughter. His only daughter, and she's 12 years old. And she's dying. And she's dying. Jairus was part of the crowd, and he pushed through. And it says and falling at Jesus' feet, he implored him to come to his house. He fell at his feet, implored, he pleaded. This was a man of desperation. Now, who was Jairus? He was the ruler of the synagogue. Now, that might sound strange. What a synagogue was is in Old Testament times, and really in the beginning of the New Testament, when the temple was not the central point, the Old Testament people of God, they had been dispersed among all the nations. And what they formed in all different regions was something called a synagogue. And a synagogue, it was very similar to what we look at as a church today, a church building. It was a place where the people of God would gather to worship and to pray. And so Jairus is the ruler of the synagogue. And that was a title that was given. It's a title that was given to the senior official of the synagogue who was responsible for organizing the services, making sure there were prayers, making sure there was reading. He was responsible for organizing these services and ensuring that things were in order in the synagogue. As I read that description, I thought, there's some similarities here. He was a man who was well positioned. He was a man of reputation. He was a spiritual man. He knew something of God and leading others in spiritual matters. And he was responsible for the logistical and spiritual matters of the synagogue. And he would represent the congregation of that synagogue to outside authorities. This is who Jairus was. Now, Jesus often taught in synagogues. He often read in synagogues, he taught in synagogues. When the church was born in the book of Acts and the missionaries went forward to different communities, they often brought the gospel first to the synagogues. These were people that knew something of God. And they brought, but there was a lot of mixed reaction. And Jesus was a controversial figure within these synagogues. Some people embraced him, some people rejected him. So this man, this ruler of the synagogue, whose daughter was dying, comes to Jesus with both desperation and humility. His daughter is dying, and he's run out of places to turn. I'm sure he's prayed. I'm sure he's talked to doctors. I'm sure he's looked, what can we do? He's run out of places. But he believed that Jesus could do something. Now enter into the story. Because this is sacred history. We see the theology of the power and authority of Jesus over sickness and death. We see it lived out in a lived experience. This man comes to Jesus with both desperation and humility. His daughter is dying. He believes Jesus could do something. But remember, he's part of this crowd. Do you remember the crowd? The onlookers? This is the ruler of the synagogue. This is the ruler of my synagogue. This is Jesus. What's he doing? Jesus, somewhat unconvinced, falling and pleading with unconventional, maybe even controversial. Did Jairus notice the other people? Did he hear what they were saying? Hey, I recognize him. What's going on here? This is the ruler of the synagogue. Did he hear their talk? Was there maybe even a sense of falling at his knees before Jesus? He's a spiritual leader. He's debasing himself. After all, Jairus, for many of them, was their spiritual leader. Who that is? Before Jesus. I look at the scene and I've asked myself, have I ever been desperate enough in seeking Jesus that I got past my pride and no longer cared what those around me were seeing or speaking about me? Have I ever been that desperate in seeking Jesus that I got past the crowd? I need Jesus. Doesn't matter what the rest of them are saying. There's two words I want you to carry forward from this as we continue this morning. Two words is humility and desperation. Humility and desperation. Jesus agrees to go with Jairus, and the crowd follows to see what was going to happen. And as they're walking along the way, we come to verse 42, and it says, as Jesus went, there was a woman. And our initial story takes a twist. And Jairus' story is now intertwined with someone else's story. And that's kind of true to life. We're often in our own zone, but our stories interact, our stories end up crossing paths with other stories. Jesus went, they're on their way. Jesus has agreed to come, and there's this woman. The initial story takes a twist. Now, there's no name given to this woman. We never know her name. Somehow we learn of her story, and the reason is because she tells it to the whole crowd. She tells it, and the whole crowd hears as she explains to Jesus in a few moments. But her name is never given. Rather, she's a woman with a bleeding disorder that she's had for 12 years of her life. Her identity is her illness. We don't know her name. We just know her, and you know her in the scriptures, the woman who had the bleeding disorder. That's what we know this woman is. 12 years of her life. It's chronic. It's debilitating. It affects everything. She's alone. There's no mention of anyone with her. No mention of a husband. No mention of children. And it may be that her condition prevented her from ever having children. And maybe made it unlikely that she would even be able to even have a husband. I mean, in this particular time period, that was where a woman's identity was often found. In marriage and in having children. And in this time period that Jesus was ministering to, this woman's alone. Maybe you've wrestled with chronic illnesses. Maybe you've walked alongside chronic illnesses. Chronic illnesses affect everything. And they affect relationships. They affect your life, your perceptions. Dealing with personal pain is seldom just personal. I was reading this week as I was trying to get my head into the space of this woman and how that might relate to people today with chronic illnesses. You know, marriages, particularly young marriages with chronic illnesses, the majority of those marriages end. Just like the majority of marriages where a child is lost come to an end. Particularly young. 12 years this woman has lived in this case. We don't know how old she was. I mean, given life expectancy numbers are kind of a little bit skewed. In Jesus' day, the average life expectancy was 35 to 40 years. Okay? 35 to 40 years. Now, that's a little bit skewed because of the high infant mortality rate. And once you average the infant mortality rate into it, your average life expectancy was 35 to 40 years. Now, if you were blessed enough to survive childhood, childhood was a dangerous time in that period. If you were blessed enough to survive childhood, to avoid having to go to war, and not catch some kind of contagious disease in a time period that didn't have penicillin. If you were fortunate enough to bypass those things, it was reasonable that you might live to be 60-ish or so. In fact, another occasion, in the Gospel of John, they're talking to Jesus is talking about knowing Abraham, and they look at Jesus and say, how can you know Abraham? You're not even a man of 50 years old yet. So people lived longer, and it wasn't unheard of that some would even live to their 90s. The Apostle John lived to be into his 90s. It wasn't a common thing, but it wasn't unheard of. The point is this, though, regardless of the age of this woman, she has spent 12 years. Let that sink in. Not only that, though, she was a woman that was considered chronically unclean. Her condition was such, if we took the time to go into Leviticus chapter 15, Old Testament ceremonial laws, both men and women were considered temporarily unclean during certain times and after certain events in their life. My delicate way of putting it. It was part of teaching about holiness and preparing us for what it is to receive grace. But for this woman, it wasn't temporary. It was constant. She was broke. She'd spent all her money on positions. She'd looked for answers. She had nothing left. Her illness had been expensive. She had nothing to show for her effort. She was alone. She was considered socially separate. She was considered unclean. And she was at the end of her rope. And this particular day, in desperation, she pushes through the crowd. She pushes through the crowd and from behind touches the hem, the edge of Jesus' garment. She believes that all she needs to do is touch Jesus. All I need to do is touch me. She reached out everywhere else. And immediately, 2 times the word is used in the passage, immediately she is healed. Now I want you to remember the theology of this passage. The theology of this passage is the authority and power of Jesus over sickness and death, expressed through human stories of desperation. Jesus doesn't even know who he healed. His crowd is there. He's like, wait a minute, we've got to stop for a minute. Something happened here. I just healed somebody, and I don't know who it is. Peter says, well, there's no way you're going to know who touched you. I don't know what Jesus knew or didn't know. In his humanity, he limited his knowledge. He healed this woman. He said, who touched me? The crowd was huge. He wanted to talk to whoever it was. Because, healing of the body is only one part of this woman's experience. She didn't get to remain anonymous. We still never know her name. The woman comes forward, falling down before him in the presence of all the people. She explains why she had touched him. She gave the uncomfortable story. The details that have us knowing that she was a woman who lived 12 years with a bleeding disorder. She's unclean. That's why she's a woman. The presence of all the people. And look at what the text says. Look at how Jesus responded. Listen to these words. He looks at her, the woman who had the bleeding disorder. We don't know her name. She looks at Jesus. Jesus looks at her and says this, daughter, your faith has made you well, go in peace. Daughter. I looked at this week, I thought about it, and tried to put myself in the moment. I'm speculating, but I want to suggest this, that perhaps more significant than the physical healing that this woman experienced was the emotional and spiritual healing that took place here. The healing of identity. This is a woman whose identity was tied up in loss. This is a woman whose identity was tied up in pain. This was a woman whose identity was tied up in this disease. And Jesus looks at her with words of tenderness, words of belonging, and says, "Daughter, that is who you are. You now belong with me. You are not alone. Tenderness and kindness, you are a daughter of God." All this takes place within the crowd. They saw it. They were talking amongst themselves, and I don't think she cared what the crowd thought. Two words I want to carry forward from this story: humility and desperation. When was the last time you sought Jesus? You pushed through the crowd. You didn't care who knew your story. You didn't care if it was maybe a little embarrassing. You didn't care what the crowd saw or what they heard, how they talked about you. You were that desperate to touch Jesus. That desperate for some part of your life this morning to be healed. Okay, remember Jairus? We talked about him a few minutes ago. Remember him? Yeah, he's here the whole time. Okay, Lord, we're taking too long. Right? He's here. This is an interruption. We're taking too long. My daughter needs us to get it. I hope this delay is not costing us. He's there. He's part of those watching this whole scene with this woman. The authority and power of Jesus over sickness and death. You know, this theology would not become a lived experience without the delay that took place. If the delay had never taken place, we wouldn't have seen the rest of this theology lived out. You know, God is never late. God is never late. And God is never in a hurry. Boy, I never hurry a lot of the times because I think I'm late and running behind, and if life is a race, I'm losing. God is never late. He is never in a hurry, and He's never worried about potentially missed opportunities. God, we're running out of time for the miracle. It's getting worse. While He was still speaking, look at verse 49. While He was still speaking, someone from the ruler's house came and said, "Your daughter is dead. You don't need to trouble Jesus." Stories of human desperation encountering Jesus. Jairus, it's over. It's now time to grieve. He sought Jesus. He fell at Jesus' feet. He didn't care about his pride. Jesus, but now it's over. We took too long. My only daughter, 12 years old, this little girl who has always had me wrapped around her little finger. Jesus, we're too late. Verse 50, but Jesus, on hearing this, answered, "Do not fear, only believe, and she will be well." I tell you the rest of the story is, well, we've read it. It's the happily ever after. The crowd is laughing at Jesus' words when Jesus says she's not really dead. They said, "We know dead's dead." Right? Look at the story. They said, we know that dead is dead. And Jesus said, "No, this is okay. This is no problem." He takes her by the hand and says, "Child, arise." And soon they're giving her something to eat, and they're celebrating the miracle. What a moment. But that's not the moment we're at yet. The news had arrived and said, your daughter's dead, the father is real. I wonder what would have happened if Jairus had simply given up when he had heard the news. He says, oh, we took too long. Okay, I'm leaving. I wonder what would have happened if he had stopped. If he had decided not to continue walking with Jesus down the road anymore. This was the story's end. What would have happened? Now I'll tell you this as I go through this story, as I wrestled with this story this week and this passage of Scripture, part of me this morning wants to teach you something. Part of me wants to teach you something. I mean, this is a passage that we can learn about the theology of divine healing and how it works. Go to James chapter 5 and talk. And I mean, I brought the anointing oil. If there's somebody that wants to be prayed for today and anointed with oil, I don't know whether God will heal you today, but I know the Scriptures say to seek Him. And if anyone is troubled or sick or oppressed, call the elders of the church and ask them to pray, anoint you with oil and pray for you. All I know is what the Bible tells me to do. And so if at the end of the service today you want to be prayed for, you come and tap me on the shoulder, or Brent's over here, one of our church elders, or Gordon, and we'll anoint you with oil and pray for you, and you get God in this. Part of me wants to teach you about divine healing, how it works. Part of me wants to focus on timing. God is never late, but maybe today you think He's taking too long. Part of me wants to spend time talking about, what about when Jesus says, no, not right now? I've prayed for healing, I've prayed for deliverance, and instead I'm called to live with His grace and strength within our weakness. I've preached about that many times. Paul, who prayed repeatedly, God, take this from me, and Jesus said, no, my grace is sufficient for you. My power will be made perfect in your weakness. Sometimes I'll admit to you, sometimes I'm a bit afraid to pray for people for healing. Sometimes when people come to me and say, Pastor, will you pray for me that God would heal me? Sometimes I'm a little bit afraid. If I talk about Jesus' power to heal and you seek Him and nothing happens, or at least not right now, will that disillusion your faith? Will that disillusion my faith? I said, I've seen Jesus answer prayer for healing. I've prayed for people and seen them healed. We have anointed people with oil in the church here and had them return later and say, the doctor can't explain why I don't have this anymore. I haven't seen it a lot, but I've seen it happen. But I confess more often I've heard him say, not right now, we're not there yet. We're not at that point on the road yet. We're still walking towards the miracle. And sometimes that miracle doesn't happen this side of the grave. Sometimes the ultimate healing, because every healing is temporary to some degree. Every person that Jesus healed still got old and dealt with all the frailties of aging and eventually had to meet Jesus through death. And barring the return of Jesus, which will happen one day, that will be each of our stories, even if we're healed of something right now. I don't want to spend my remaining moments teaching you something. Rather, I want us to get caught up in the moment that these human stories are in. I want us to feel in this passage what it is for desperate people to seek the divine. Do not fear, only believe. And now we have to keep walking by faith. We're at that point of the story. What do I do when I hear the bad news? Okay, Jesus, I saw it in you and it didn't work. I guess we're done. Do not be afraid. Do not fear. Only believe. And now we have to keep walking by faith in the midst of a story that we don't want to be in. And keep walking with Jesus until we get there, despite the bad news along the way. See, dear people, this morning, maybe, just maybe this morning, is the morning for the miracle in your life. It's possible This might be that part of the story for you. And that's part of the desperate seeking of Jesus. Maybe this morning is the morning of the miracle. Or maybe it gets interrupted and you have to decide to keep walking with Jesus along the road before you reach the destination of the miracle. Are you still walking with Jesus today? Are you still holding his hand? Some of you are hurting. Some of you haven't seen the miracle yet. But are you still walking with Jesus like Jairus, on the road towards the house? The miracle hasn't happened yet. The news just seems to go from bad to worse. I don't even know why. I don't even know what my hope is. All I know is that I'm holding on to Jesus' hand. All I know is that he's who I need. All I know I'm desperate. Are you still walking with Jesus today, even if you haven't reached the point in your story where you celebrate the miracle? But even more, two words. Two words I want you to carry with you today. Humility and desperation. Am I there yet? Am I there when I come to Jesus with humility and desperation? I don't care what the rest think of my status. I'm the ruler of the synagogue after all. People look up to me. I'm supposed to be better than this. I don't care what the rest of them think of my status. I don't care if I look undignified to the crowd. I don't care what they think of my unclean story. Maybe it's embarrassing to me, but I don't care. Am I desperate enough to lay down my pride and to fall at Jesus' feet, imploring, pleading, Jesus, I need you, or I am undone? Daughter, you're my daughter. You're my son. Your faith has made you well. Go in peace. No words touched me more than that in this passage this past week. For as I thought on those words and I meditated on those words, I hear Jesus say, you are not what you have done. You are not where you have been. You are not what you have experienced. You are not the rejection of others. You are not your pains. You are not your diseases. You are not your experiences. They do not define you. Daughter, they define you. Being in me. Jesus names you in response to your humble desperation. Believe who you are in me. You're no longer alone. You're my daughter, my son in Christ. Go forward in peace. Humility and desperation. That's what these stories are. The theology of the authority and power of God to deliver, to heal, to bring back from the dead, to calm storms, to provide food for the 5,000. The power and authority of Jesus to live experience. People who came to a place of, I'm desperate enough to humble myself towards the God who is the one that I need. Am I desperate enough to lay down my pride and to fall at Jesus' feet, imploring, pleading, Jesus, I need you, for I am undone. Have you ever been there? Are you still trying to find the answers to these things? What does it look like to be desperate enough to be humble at the feet of Jesus? What feeling would Jesus bring into our lives The theology, the authority and power of Jesus over sickness and death needs to find its expression within lived experience. They can't just be ideas and knowledge that's out there that we know from Bible stories. The authority and power of Jesus needs to find an expression within lived experience, within sacred stories, within our stories, within your story this morning. Dear people, what healing would Jesus bring into our lives, into our home, into our church, into our pain, spirits, and minds, into our identities? What places of spiritual bondage would be broken? What healing and peace might we find if we ever got desperate enough, not caring what others might think of our story, to fall at his feet and really seek him, letting Jesus define who we are and who we will be, believing in the end that he is behind. Remember the song, "The things of this earth will go strangely dim in the light of his glory and grace." We get caught up in so many things that at the end of the day will not matter. We get upset about things in our workplaces, in our homes, in our church, in all kinds of situations that at the end of the day will not matter. But Job once said this: "Job, who knew suffering like few, who wrestled with God in his pain and suffering, questioned God, cried out and hollered." I get that. I've had to apologize to God before for my profanity when I've walked in the bush and hollered at God and said, "Life is not fair." But God is kind and the cross brings forgiveness. And he still looks at me and says, "You're my son. You're my daughter." Job said, "I know that my Redeemer lives, and that he will stand at the latter day. When all is gone, there is one who will be there. His name is Jesus." What would happen if with humility you became desperate for Jesus? As our passage has spoken about the power and authority of Jesus, it's fitting for us to finish with an anthem of worship that really expresses that power and authority, crown him with many crowns. And we're going to sing that, and then we will be dismissed. But if you're here this morning and you want somebody to pray for you, or you're here this morning and God is speaking into your life, you've heard me, many of you have heard me say it many times. Once you walk out that door, the world gets noisy again. But in this quiet place, in this thin place between us and the divine, perhaps God is speaking to you this morning. If you need to just have time alone to pray, then please feel free to stand here and do that. If you want somebody else to pray for you, you don't even have to tell your story. Just say, "You know what? Just pray for me." And one of our elders or their spouses would be more than happy to come and just pray with you. If you want somebody to anoint you with oil and pray for you, and go through James 5 with you, by all means. Myself or one of the elders. It's not us. It's not our church. It's not anything. It's Jesus. And that's what we want to teach Jesus.
Crown him with many crowns, the Lamb upon his throne. Hark how the heavenly anthem drowns music-bodied song. Awake, my soul, and sing of him who died for thee. Let him as thy matchless matchless King through all eternity. Crown him the Lord of love, who triumphed o'er the grave, who rose victorious to the strong. For this came to save, his glories now we see, who died and rose on high, who died eternal life to bring, and lives that death may die. Crown him the Lord of love, behold his hands and side, rich wounds yet visible above, glorified, no angel in the sky can fully bear that sight, but downward bends each burning eye, that mystery so bright. Crown him with many crowns, the Lamb upon his throne. Hark how the heavenly anthem drowns, listen but its song. Awake my soul and sing of him who died for thee, and hail him as the matchless King through all eternity.
Lord Jesus Christ, our Lord, our Savior, King, Holy Spirit, our Comforter, the one who anoints, convicts, who exhorts, and shapes, and makes us more like Jesus. We leave this place today, Lord, believing that your Spirit has been upon us. And I pray for your people here, Lord, that you would speak into our hearts. I pray that you would bring healing into our hearts and lives as we become desperate people who humble ourselves before you with Jesus only, blessed Master. Lord, we need you. And we need to become desperate for you. Lord, break our pride. Break our pride if we need to do so. And bring us to places as individuals, as families, even as a church, where we are willing to be desperate and humble before you. And make you the biggest, all-encompassing part of our lives. I pray, Lord, if there are people here this morning that are seeking you in some form of deliverance or healing or some kind of spiritual or physical or emotional need, I pray, Lord, that you would meet with them. I would pray, Lord, that you would bring miracle to some this morning. But if that's not the point of the story here, then I pray, Lord, that you will bolster and fill their faith, that in their desperation and humility, they may continue to walk alongside you, along the road, until they get to the place where you will be with your Savior. You are God. You are God. Help us to remember that as we do this. May the Lord bless you and keep you. May the Lord make his face shine upon you and be gracious to you. May the Lord turn his face towards you. As the Lord dismisses you.
Until the next time.